What's up, LEGO builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios. Now, when it comes to building large-scale mocks, I usually don't have a timeline of when they'll be done until about a month before everything's finished, which usually isn't a problem, except for last year when I was trying to finish Coruscant right before moving across the country. So, as I've neared the end of this series, I've tried to pinpoint an end date for finishing this mock in the finale. And right now, I'm hoping to have the entire mock done by the end of the month. So, this and the next update are going to be very crucial in hitting that goal, as the third city plateau isn't even started and the main bridge still has exposed filler plate.
The gravy's naked!
I've got my work cut out for me this week, so grab a cup of that sus blue milk everyone's been buying. Don't forget to execute order 66 on that like button, and let's get building. There's going to be a lot of minifigures waging war on this bridge very soon, so I need to get it all tiled off ASAP. I haven't done much tiling of late because it's not super vital to the foundations of the build, and I wanted to get all those in. But that's mostly done by now, so I need to buckle in and do some more boring grunt work. I can't even pass this work off to a little brother or something because I need studs in specific places for the minifigs, so as I'm placing the tile, I'm also envisioning where I would like the clones and droids to be and what the flow of the battle's going to look like, because nothing is more annoying than when you go to set up minifigs and there are no studs in the spot you need, and redoing tile is messy work. The same thing goes for the snow. I don't want to just throw it down on the bridge at random. I want it to look like the patches have been shaped by what's going on the bridge. I'm building these channels in between the snow where troops have continually trod, trampling and melting trails into the snow. I'm also not putting any snow near where the explosion craters are, since, you know, it doesn't do too well in extreme heat. And fear not, if you're watching and thinking that's just not enough snow, once all the mock's done, I'll go back through and add in smaller patches. These big ones are just going in now to help me save on dark bluish gray tile. And speaking of craters, there's still empty pits, so I'm gonna add small bits comprised of slopes and plate around the edges to make it look more realistic and create a better transition from the hole to the road. Then along the edge of the hole in go more plate and tiles to cover up the gaps between the snot slopes and the rest of the bridge. I must say, this crater's looking mighty fine. While I was building, I had the idea to put the wreckage of one of the smaller tri-droids in the crater, kind of like it got smoked by a Republic rocket or mortar. I'm feeling much better about the bridge, so now it's time to turn my focus to the third city plateau. This is the final bit of foundation work that needs to be done, and it's rather daunting, so I need to get cracking if I want to be finished by June. I started by laying out the beginnings of the support beams. I started placing the first row of plate, and every time I reached the end of one of them, I stuck a piece of support beam in so I would know where it needed to connect to the mountain and still sit under the end of a plate. I have one support beam in, but these guys are really wobbly and breakable, so before I put in the rest, I need to build the massive underside supports that'll hold everything up. I was a little nervous I would run out of filler brick while building this mock because the city is so high up and I've never built a support system this big or extensive. But I'm proud to say my collection stepped up and did not fail me. These are pretty easy to build. The only challenge I have is moving around without dropping them.
Oh, come on!
I've addressed this a bunch, but I'll do it again just because I'm sure someone will say something. I don't use Duplo when doing filler work. I just don't need it. I already own all of this brick, so it's free to work with, and it just looks cooler in my opinion. I made another pleasant discovery while building this last foundation. I only needed 2 of the big supports to hold everything up, which will save me a lot of time and parts. The supports are in, and they're pretty wobbly still, but that's not a big deal because the support beams run across the top, securing them in place, and the plates on top of those beams connect everything to the mountain in a way that makes this entire foundation very sturdy and easy to build on. I've really enjoyed the building process of these foundations. It reminds me of my framing days. You'd start out building the walls of a house that you can push over with your hands. Those all connect to each other, and then you just run joists across the top, which can be broken in half if you step on them wrong. But by the time everything's connected together and the second floor is on, you have a rock solid foundation. The plate will be exposed on the far side of this plateau, so I made sure to stop the filler plate short so the last row could be dark bluish gray. The last thing I need is more exposed filler plate. At last, the entire foundations of the city are in and I can build the final plateau. That means it's time to dust off a very old and broken build. I made this building all the way back in week 3 or 4 of the series, and unfortunately it got cannibalized for parts. I often do this when I'm building if I need a part or two for another video or a quick build. Luckily, the bulk of the structure is still in place, so the restoration won't be too extensive. This building was designed by Ritter Thomas, who rendered a bunch of custom Mygeeto builds, which was super helpful to me and helped me get real up close and personal with some Mygeeto looking architecture. So Ritter, if you ever watch this series, thanks. I also added some upgrades like this extra row of plate reinforcing the base of the building. This thing is too cool to be a house, so I think I'm going to make it a tavern or entertainment center of sorts. Let me know in the comments what you think this building should be. This is definitely the coolest one I'll have in the city. I did want to add more, but it's just too big to really fit into the other plateaus. The angled pillars jutting out from the circular base really set this one apart from the other houses, and the tall dish roof helps keep it on brand with the rest of the architecture of the city. Unfortunately, these dishes are too small for me to light up with my puck lights, so it will be dark, but the surrounding buildings should hopefully be enough to illuminate this last plateau. And I'm hoping to be able to fit at least 2 more houses in this section. I have the bases for a couple more, and now that I have the tavern finished, I can start laying out what this last section of the city is going to look like. This third plateau is a lot bigger than I was expecting. I honestly think I could probably fit another building here in the front or on this far side if I scooted this tavern to the left, but the roofs of these houses are super wide, taking up a lot more space than the base of the structure. And I don't want a bunch of roofs crowded together, clogging up the view and making this plateau look bad. So I'll probably stick with the original layout with these 3 buildings. Plus, this gives me more space for anti-aircraft emplacements and other small builds to give the city some more variety and interesting things to look at. Now that I know where the buildings will go, I can add paths, trees, and statues to match the other 2 plateaus. I'm gonna have an ingot path run past the tavern on this side and by the other buildings, ending on the other side of the tavern, basically creating a U shape. Then to cap off the plateau for safety, I'm gonna run that stone retaining wall up this side and the front side since I don't want anybody losing their ball in a busy street. Bruh. I decided this would be the perfect spot for the final anti-aircraft emplacement. It's right in front so the guns have a clear shot at any incoming ships, and the flat open space will give the separatists and myself a good spot to build some platforms to elevate each of the cannons. At the end of the plateau, I'm going to build a larger version of this power complex. Just a bunch of controls, energy columns, and other technical looking stuff. The perfect filler builds for a large city. Then all I'll need to do is tile off the leftover open spaces and add snow. And speaking of tile, I'm slowly covering up the bridge. I realized this week what I have long been hoping wasn't true. I don't have enough dark bluish gray tile to finish everything. Even covering up large parts of the bridge with snow still wasn't enough, since I still need to do this bridge, the rest of the secondary bridge, and that final plateau. So I'm gonna have to order in a bunch more, but I guess it could be worse. Dark bluish gray tile almost always comes in handy, especially for a clone base lover like myself. The battle damage crater is looking real good. I dumped the broken tri-droid in there just as a placeholder to show you what I had planned, and I honestly think it looks pretty good just like that, but I might dismantle the guns and legs a bit more just to make it look more realistically broken up. Before I tile off the rest of the bridge, I should probably get those last light posts in so I can bury them under the tile and snow. This video marks one of the biggest and most exciting milestones of the series. All the Galactic Marines have been decaled. I'm assembling 2 of the last Marines here and I'll be done soon. I can't tell you how happy I am. This is the 3rd series in a row where I've decaled the clones for the build, and these were by far the most difficult. Painting multiple coats of dark red on the helmets, sourcing unique backpacks, and cutting out cloths was a very time-consuming process, and since it's so icy and cold on Mygeeto, I couldn't supplement the ranks with regular grunts like I normally do, so I had to decal as many of these bad boys as possible to make sure I had enough clones. This was a labor of love though, as I think these might be my all-time favorite clone trooper. They're so unique and vibrant with the large helmets and dark red armor. The cloth waist cape and pauldron give these clones so much detail and immediately level up any mock they're in. I have a lot of Marines grouped up on the bridge and spread out through the mock, so next I need to gather them all together, get a count, and set them up nicely for the upcoming every minifig and Mygeeto video I'm making. You may have noticed some don't have their arms in, and I'll be addressing why in that video. Lastly, it's time to tackle something that's been on the back burner for months. I need to add the rest of the secondary bridge. It's just going to be a continuation of what you already see. I just want it to stick further out from the main bridge, and a little extra room on the other side of the tunnel might be enough for another vehicle. You know that process, I know the process, and thankfully this is the last piece of the bridge that needs to be built, and I'm hoping this chunk will be short enough that when it's connected to the rest of the bridge it won't sag and need a support pillar. Having done this build so many times, I'm getting pretty good at using as much filler brick as I can to limit how much light bluish gray brick I'll need, since I'm running low on that, which is pretty surprising since after Coruscant I thought I'd never run out of gray brick again. Unfortunately, I still need a bunch of the short 2x2 slopes that give the bridge walls their rounded appearance. I have 100 more on the way from Bricklink, but I can already tell it's not enough since the main bridge and roads still need a bunch. Seems like no matter how many parts I have in my collection, there's always 1 or 2 weird parts I need to buy for each series. All I gotta do now is plate off the bottom and add the last 2 lights. I'm so glad I figured out a way to wire the lights on the surface of the bridge so I don't have to run anything down here. I left the edge of the chunk unbuilt so that when I connect it to the bridge, I can connect the 2 pieces together as strongly as possible and eliminate as many weak points as I can. The connection is pretty fragile still, so I had to put some impromptu supports underneath. One thing that'll help hold these two sides together is tile. I'm gonna add some spanning the seam on the bridge floor. That should really bring everything together. I don't want to get carried away and do too much though, since I still need to run and bury the wires to the last lights. While I was here, I figured I might as well add some snow patches on the other side of the lights where there won't be any wires. I want to get as much snow as I can built now so I can know how much more white wedge plate and tile to order in, since any order made after a certain date won't get here until after May. The bridge is in and looking so good. I'm waiting to do the rest until I add the lights, but I added some footprints near the back just as a little extra detail. I've been trying to add these into as many patches of snow as possible for continuity and to make the whole thing feel more lifelike. The bridge now sticks out much further from the main bridge and feels more like a complete build. I was expecting to need a support underneath, but as you can see, according to my torpedo level, this thing is almost perfectly level without anything holding it up, which is a pretty cool engineering achievement if you ask me. It feels so good to have the entire city foundations in. And I feel like the city's basically done at this point, even though that last plateau is only just laid out. Having designed and built 2 other plateaus, I'm gonna cruise through this last one since the problem solving is done and I have most of the parts I need. And I'm absolutely ecstatic to have all those Galactic Marines finally decaled. For some reason, the arm decals had a really hard time sticking, which has never happened to me before and was super frustrating. But the army I've created was well worth the suffering, as you guys will see shortly. Next week is gonna be a big update because it just might be the final one before the finale, and you don't want to miss out on that. But that wraps up this video. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about everything down below in the comments, and I'll catch you next time. But until then, happy building.